In a drawer at an institute in Beijing, there is a plaster copy of a skull. It is catalogued as IVPP.AN1. The skull it was copied from has not been seen by anyone since 1941. Near the top of that copy, there is a shallow dent, about the width of a thumbnail, and for the better part of 80 years, that dent was the best single piece of evidence that ancient humans butchered and ate each other. It took until 2022 for somebody to work out what it actually was, and the only reason she could is that the man who made the accusation had done one careful thing first. 42 kilometers southwest of Beijing, there is a limestone hill that local people had quarried for generations. They called the fossils that came out of it dragon bones. In 1921, excavation started properly, and in 1929, a young Chinese researcher named Pei Wengzhong found a skull cap. That site is Zhoukoudian, and what came out of it is still the richest collection of its kind anywhere in the world. Remains of about 40 individuals. Homo erectus, Peking Man. If you have ever seen the textbook picture, early humans in a cave mouth gathered around a fire, stone tools in their hands, that picture is Zhoukoudian. This is the site that taught the 20th century what early humans were like. In 1935, a German anatomist named Franz Weidenreich took over the scientific work. He was, by a wide margin, the best person alive at describing a fossil skull, and before he did anything else, he had exact plaster casts made of every important specimen. Hold on to the casts. They matter later, and not for the reason you would expect. Weidenreich noticed something strange about the collection, and he was right to. Almost everything coming out of that hill was skull. Brain cases, jaws, teeth, hardly any arms, hardly any legs, and the skulls were wrecked in a consistent way, faces missing, the base broken open, and scattered across the tops of them marks, depressions, scars, grooves. He turned that over for years, and in the 1940s he published what he thought it meant. Somebody had brought heads back to that cave, opened them, and eaten what was inside. Peking Man was a cannibal. It is easy to hear that now and assume he was reaching. He was not. The pattern is genuinely strange, he was the most qualified anatomist alive to describe it, and the idea fit his century. A lot of people coming out of the First World War were sure violence was the engine that built us. Given what was in front of him, that was the careful reading. So it stuck. For decades, that was simply what Zhoukoudian meant. And then in 1941, with the war closing in on Beijing, the fossils were packed into crates for evacuation. They left the city. They never arrived anywhere. Every original specimen from that site is gone. In 1985, Louis Binford and Ho Chuan Kun pressed a question nobody really had. What if the cave was never a home? Then, in the early 2000s, Noel Boaz, Russell Siushan, and their Chinese colleagues Xu Qin-chi and Liu Jinyi went through the assemblage properly. Their answer was that the cave belonged to something else. Pachycircuita brevirostris, a giant short-faced hyena. Not a chaser, a bone specialist, heavy through the shoulders, built to crack open what other animals had to give up on. Roughly two-thirds of the Homo erectus material carries carnivore damage. The missing faces are what happens when something crushes the front of a skull to reach the soft tissue behind it. On their reading, Zhoukoudian was never a home with a hearth in it. It was a den, and the famous 40 were what was left on the floor. The resistance to that was not stupid either. It reclassified the most celebrated early humans in Asia as food refuse, and it leaned on old photographs and casts, because that is all anyone has. Boaz and his colleagues said plainly in their own paper that there was damage in the collection which carnivores did not explain. Two dramatic stories, and no bodies left to check either one against. In 2022, a paleoanthropologist at the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology in Beijing, named Wu Shujie, went and got the casts. 5 of them. Copies Weidenreich had ordered made almost 90 years earlier, of skulls that no longer exist. She was not looking the way a taphonomist looks at damage. She was looking the way a doctor looks at an injury on somebody who walked into a clinic. Where is it? What shape is the edge? And what did the bone do next? 8 of the marks on those casts were the ones that had been read as cannibalism. 7 of them were healing. Bone repairs itself, slowly, and it leaves a smooth, rounded lip around the edge of the damage where new bone has closed in over the old. That only happens in a living body. A mark made on a corpse stays sharp forever. Those 7 dents were not made by anyone taking anything out of a head. They were blows delivered while the person was alive and then survived, for weeks or months, long enough for the skull to grow back over the damage. The grooves on 2 of the other casts, the ones Weidenreich had read as marks from a tool, turned out to be natural, or made by an animal chewing. One did not heal. A single cranial fragment with a deep depressed crack and no repair on it at all. And the pattern of where these injuries sit, mostly the sides and top of the head, some on the forehead, is the pattern you get when people hit each other, not when something eats them. The accusation was 80 years old, and it was withdrawn using plaster copies of the evidence, ordered by the man who made it. Now, I want to be careful about how much this settles, because it is less than it sounds. Wu says so herself. These are casts. Plaster does not hold the fine surface detail a fossil does, and that detail is exactly what a modern analysis wants. She writes that the work needs verification against fossil evidence, and the fossils are gone. There is no version of this where somebody goes and checks. The hyenas do not disappear either. That evidence stands. Both things are true. People were hit in the head and lived, and at some point carnivores got hold of a lot of the same bodies. A cave can be many things across 500,000 years. Even the age is unsettled. Depending on which dating you read, Locality 1 runs from somewhere north of 500,000 years old to a few 100,000. And consistent with interpersonal violence is not the same sentence as they fought each other. A fall does that. A rock fall does that. What the healing tells you is not who swung, only that somebody was still alive afterward. So go back to the drawer in Beijing. A plaster copy of a skull nobody has seen since 1941 with a dent near the top. And around the edge of that dent, in the copy, in the plaster, 90 years on, a smooth raised lip where the bone was growing back. That lip is the whole story. It is the reason we know this person was not somebody's meal. Their own body wrote it, in the same place as the wound, out of the only material it had. You have that. Every bone in you keeps a record of what it has been through and what it did about it. Break a finger at 9 and it is still legible decades later, a slight thickening where the repair went in. Your skeleton is not a frame. It is the one part of you quietly documenting your entire life, and it does not throw anything away. Somebody was hit in the head somewhere north of 500,000 years ago, in a cave a hyena would eventually claim, and the only witness that stayed on their side was their own skull. You are not broken. You are not weak. You inherited this.